Good morning, sir. Good morning, everyone. I am Charmona Marie Fidelis. I am a nursing student from College of Health Sciences Education. I am the 17th reporter, which will tackle about the image into text. Before I start my lecture, I have these questions that will open your mind about the importance of reading visual arts, which is our subject. Have you read a book or watched a movie without speaking words on it, and it portrayed images only? Did you understand what the movie or story conveys? Did the movie or story got your attention? Are you having fun with what you had watched or read? Did the movie narrate the story? As we can see, we can appreciate movies or books if we can see pictures or images. And that is the importance of reading visual arts. Even it didn't contain too much words, but we can think critically what happened in a story or movies, like Tom and Jerry and Mr. Bean. As we can observe, these movies are full of actions, but we are able to understand what they want to portray or convey. After answering all those questions, you will realize how visual arts are important in conveying meanings and giving knowledge to the people what they had watched and read. Visual arts are much understandable than narrative arts. Most people in the world are visual learners. They learn more if they would see images, pictures, or videos. And one of the forms of visual arts are comic strips. We will discuss how the comic strip or these comic strips that are old forms of visual arts help people or help us to understand and how it can portray messages even it didn't contain too much words. Now let's start. The title of our topic today is Image into Text. This image into text means that an image can narrate a story or explains a story. And one of the visual arts that can portray a message is the comic strips. What are meaning or what is these comic strips? What are they? What are they want to convey? Or what is the importance of comic strips in helping us to understand more or to understand or to able to help us to understand a certain story or a certain movies or videos. Comic strips, these are the visual text. Comic strips are considered as visual text because, as we can see, comics, there's a lot of images in it, and the images will convey messages or will convey text that help us to understand the flow, to understand the story behind it. So that most obviously rely on verbal language outside of films and videos, because the comic strips are not like films and videos that has a in videos that are there's a lot of saying or there's a lot of words, but the comic strips outside of films and videos can be defined as open and the dramatic narrative about a recruiter set of characters told in a series of drawings, because we can see comic strips that has a lot of images, pictures, often including dialogue in balloons and a marriage text. But in a comic strips, there's a Dialogue contains two little words only. So, comic strips are very old forms. So, ang comic strips ay noon pa, or the comic strips are used by people long ago until now. They are very old forms. Our ancestors used comic strips. And the codes and conventions. So what is these codes and conventions? These codes and conventions are symbol or a system of principles or rules, or the basic principle of procedures. Or what are the principles or rules of the comic strips? The comic strips were finally formalized by the 20th century, with many of their features standardized. The arrangement of panels to the government, the pattern of reading, different shaped balloons for speech and thought, conventions of movement, because as we can see in a comic strips, it has a lot of movement that will help us to understand how the character move from one place to another place. Narrational comments, descriptive captions, facial expressions, and onomatopoeia. So now we are going to tackle one of a comic strip, which is The Blood in the Gutter. So what is in here? What is in here in this comic strip, Blood in the Gutter? So this is the image or the picture of the comic strips Blood in the Gutter. As we can see in the first picture, it is a country, has a lot of buildings, and the second picture is a man is running. Then it has a small only dialogue. This is second picture, and the third, and the fourth, and this is the second picture. So now this comic strip illustrate most of these conventions. It begins with a cinematographic long shot, an establishing shot from above the city, then immediately zooms in to street level where someone given the cape, mask, and muscles, presumably a superhero, is speeding into frame. So let's go back to the picture. So in the picture, as we see or as we saw it, we can conclude that it is composed, or its character is a superhero, because it wears a cap. From the first observing it, we can conclude that its genre is a superhero. So the title Blood in the Gutter picks up on the mean streets notion associated with the detective genre. So we assume he is trying to solve a problem and restore order. And the subtitle, The Case of the Missing Information, substantiate the detective genre but in a parodic sense, juxtaposing a down and dirty American detective subgenre with a Miss Marple or Nancy Drew. The Case of can only be intending to make fun of the whole genre, and the empty speech bubbles and the racial boxes reiterate this. Little or nothing is being said, perhaps because it has all been said before so often in one formulaic text after another, and hence perhaps we see Sarah and Butch, their minds rotted away by static consumption of cultural texts. So we had described, or we read about what happened in the story. So now let's look at the connection between the words and the pictures in this strip to identify how its effects are produced. We are going to look what is the effect or what is the impact of the pictures to that text, or how the pictures conveys or narrates the story in the comic strip. So first, the drawing is very much in genre for a superhero thriller or action narrative. We can conclude that the genre is superhero because the character in the story or in the comic strip wears a cap, wears a mask that will describe a character of a superhero. Second is each frame replicates the zooms, jump cuts, and rocking shots of films and propels the narrative by moving us, the viewers, through the space and events. So as we can see in the comic strip, the character move from one place to another place, which will caught our attention to move from one place and to another place also. So the image has impact on how the character moves. So third is every line seems committed to action and constant movement. The hero races, leaps, dives, or stands in alert readiness. Even when the door is open, he can just walk in because that's not what heroes do. So we can see in the comic strip this line. So let's go back. The character said, "I'd feel better if the others were here. It's too easy. May I should with another way in." So in that statement or in that picture, we can conclude that he is truly a superhero because he can just walk in, because that's not what heroes do, because a superhero knows that entering another's or entering other people's house or other people's property is an action of a criminal, and that what heroes do not do. So we can conclude that he is a superhero. So fourth is the urgency of the story is signaled partly by hero's rapid movement and taut posture, and also by the sharp perspective in many frames. For instance, the floorboards and the tiles that run quickly to the vanishing point force our eyes to move quickly as well. So the character in the story or the superhero's rapid movement force our eyes to move quickly as well. So the movement of the character impacts our eyes to move also with quickly movement. So it has impact. The story or the comic strips has impact for us to understand that the superhero, that the character in the story moves rapidly. So 5, other conventions are obeyed too. Lines indicating the direction of movements show in each frame where he has come from, where is he headed, and how rapidly. Frustration is shown in lines darting from his forehead and the irritated onomatopoetic tap click of his foot on the floor. So let's go back to the image. So as we can see, there is a word click in the second images. In the second image, click. So it means that there was a criminal in the story, and the character is a detective who wants to catch the criminal. From the word click, it's just one word, but it has a kind of impact on the flow of the story or the other character of the story. So next, and when he dives through the doorway, the energy of his movement is signaled by the kablam that accompanies the catch as a narrative sound effect. So from the word kablam, it describes the sound effect in the story. Even though we cannot hear it or we cannot show the movement of it, but it can give us insight that there was a kablam sound effect, and which means that the character caught already the criminal or the kalaban. And number 8, the story being told, though, as the title and subtitle suggest, is parodic, making fun of both the genre of detective or superhero graphic forms and of academic doublespeak. So all of these are the connection of the images and the text in a story that will help us to understand the story, even though it didn't contain too much words. But we are able to understand it. We are able to know the flow of the story or what happened in the story because of the visual, because of the images. So now, let's go to the conclusion. There is a person, Ernst Gombrich, writes that there must be a great difference between a painting that illustrates a known story and another that wishes to tell a story. So this suggests that reading a visual narrative often effectively involves writing it. So for him, reading a visual narrative should have a words, should have a kind of text writing on it, pictures for the most part depict things or illustrate known story. So for Ernst Gombrich, the pictures or visuals can depict or can illustrate stories, but that don't necessarily narrativize them. For him, an image cannot narrate a story. So this is the history of the visual arts or the reading visual arts and in the Western era. In fact, with the passage of time in the Western tradition, narrative has increasingly retreated from the visual text. So the Western era are taken away from the visual text. And in the Renaissance time, starting with the Renaissance, when the development of linear perspective shifted the focus of the viewer from the story being depicted to the illusion of reality of three-dimensional space. So there is a three-dimensional space in that time. So in modern era, today, 21st century, narrative has pretty much retreated from art, though it's present in graphic novels, films, television programs, and other visual genres that are still committed to story. So in modern era, narrative or text is retreated or taken away from art, but narrative art is present until today in novels. Yes, we can see pictures in novels, but also it has a lot of text, films, television programs, and other visual genres. So next. So the change, another person, Martin J. suggests, is based on more general changes in social understanding and values. So in medieval period, the world was seen as the book of nature. There as an intelligible object available to be read and containing God's order by the Enlightenment. It was an object, observation without a narrative or meaning outside its functionality. And in 20th century, by the 20th century, with the decline in certainty about any meaning or possibility of order, visual art had turned to complete abstraction or a storyless image in 20th century. That thing had happened in 20th century. So while there is, as we have seen, considerable doubt as to the capability of images to convey narrative in its strict sense, visual images have regularly had a narrative component. So this is true. Visual images have regularly had a narrative component, such as cave paintings, bas reliefs, mosaic Stations of the Cross, diptych, and triptych artworks. Other people didn't consider that visual images had narrative component, but now we can conclude that visual images had a narrative component, because such as paintings, though it is just a picture, but we all know that paintings convey messages. Paintings has its explanation. Paintings has its story that will help us to understand what or how the artist make the paintings, or what is their inspiration in their paintings, and we are able to understand their paintings through the image, through the colors. And though, as Rosalind Krauss points out, visual texts are highly multiple and layered and rarely transparent stories, there is always some structural principles structuring order to reduce the anarchy of polysemmy. And this is the last text or explanation of this topic. Visual works may not easily tell stories, like other people said that visual works are just images, not narrating story, but they have huge narrative potential and great expressive power, the ability to convey emotions, ideas, and attitudes. And that is true, because through images we can express our emotion, we can express our ideas, and also our attitudes by drawings, paintings, arts. And do direct readers to particular narratives, because all images portray text. All images conveys message, conveys meanings, and all these things in the world has its purpose also has its meanings. And that will conclude that visual arts or visual is important to people to easily understand a story, movies, or videos. So thank you for listening. I hope that you had learned a lot from me, even though I didn't explain it too much, but I know you had learned from me. And thank you.